want me to repeat? Okay, the definition of dark energy. Yeah, see, that's simple. That dark energy is a mysterious pressure in the vacuum space. So it is a kind of a pressure. Now, what that pressure does, that we'll look in the later section. It is a mysterious pressure in the vacuum space that acts in the opposite direction of gravity. And since it is acting in the opposite direction of gravity, it forces the universe to expand further. Okay, so I was talking about the cosmological constant. So to just give you a brief, when Einstein announced his general theory of relativity in 1915, he added a term cosmological constant into his equation, his field equations. And that cosmological constant was a term called lambda. And he announced in later years that lambda was one of the biggest blunder of his life. So he thought lambda was a biggest mistake that he performed in his life. But apparently, 69 years later, it is not found to be a mistake, and that you will learn in the later slides. Also, we'll try to understand the basic nature of dark energy. Now, this is important and this is related to the expansion of universe. How the dark energy is responsible for expansion. See, it is one thing to say that Earth is in orbit around the sun because of gravitational force. But how is that force interacting among the two masses? What is the underlying mechanism behind transmission of that force? So for the example I'm giving you right now, I can say the curvature in the space-time fabric is causing the force that we call the gravitational force. Similarly, we need to understand what is the underlying mechanism that dark energy is applying on our universe to expand it further. That we will understand in the last segment today. So almost 3/4 out of 4 of all energy in the universe is a mysterious form which we call dark energy. So we saw yesterday that out of total 100%, 68% comes from matter energy density, which is contributed by dark matter and dark energy. So majorly dark energy, because dark matter we have 27% out of it, and the rest is of normal matter. It is said and known that the dark energy has negative gravity, that it exerts in the force in the opposite direction of gravity. Because of dark energy, the universe will expand forever. Now, what is the evidence that supports the existence of dark energy? So there are primarily two evidence. The first one is the cosmic microwave background radiation. I told you that we are from the point of Big Bang, we are today expanding 13.8 billion years. We are here today expanding. While you must have imagined how a normal explosion takes place with great luminosity and brightness, and there is a lot of energy there. But when Big Bang explosion took place, there was no light at all, because light needs a particular temperature and pressure to exist. And what do we mean by light? We essentially mean photons. There needs to be a stable environment for photons to be created. And you imagine, I told you this point here, this one, this point here, if you break in 1 trillion parts, then one part out of it was the singularity from which the whole universe exists today. That 1 by trillionth part held infinite temperature and infinite density. Imagine how a photon is even possible to be created at that moment of time. So first photon came into existence here, and this was after 3,80,000 years. This point in the time scale is called to be CMBR, cosmic microwave background radiation. And the observational data that Hubble Space Telescope collects, and most of our ground telescopes also, is fit into the model of CMBR coming into existence at 3,80,000 years. And that is why we can proudly say that yes, Big Bang explosion is the most probable cause for the origin of our universe. What made that explosion? No one knows, because to imagine such a point divided into trillion parts and then to hold infinite temperature and density is itself a challenging task to think about. So solving it is a rather difficult challenge. So that is why we do not know how it got exploded, but we know that CMBR came into picture after 380,000 years from the blast. So CMBR can be associated with dark energy, and those are the observational data that is taken by the space telescopes as well as ground telescopes. What is the second point? Second is the accelerating expansion of the universe that is observed. So this is a major one. Second point alone can prove the existence of dark energy. Otherwise, our universe would not have been expanding. That is true. Dark energy began to dominate all other forms of energy about 6 billion years ago. So why is that so? Because before 6 billion years, we had dark matter and normal matter energy density dominate. There needs to be enough amount of vacuum in the space to generate more dark energy. So do you understand? See, I'll just give you a glimpse of something more weird to imagine. When we imagine something being empty, we say that this is empty space. There was a singularity and it got exploded in every direction. But some astrophysicists say that it got exploded, and with the fragments being exploded and being thrown out in separate directions, along with the transmission of those fragments, the space got created. So there is no space. Do you understand this? Suppose this is the observable universe. If the expansion is from here to here, this is the expansion in one day, then this wasn't space anymore. There was no space here. The space was created. This vacuum is created by dark energy. And because this vacuum is created by dark energy, more vacuum is created by dark energy itself. And with the creation of this vacuum, more dark energy comes into picture. So I'll explain you in more detail. I might sound really vague right now for you to understand, but we'll see that later. And before then, the attractive gravity of the matter, both of normal and dark matter, as I mentioned, dominated. Now, the closest we can come to prove what what dark energy is made of, we can stumble upon the idea of virtual particle. And what does it say? That quantum physics states. Now, what is quantum physics? Quantum means the study of the smallest as in what we cannot imagine to identify with naked eyes, smaller than electrons and protons and neutrons, fermions, quarks, hadrons, and such. So quantum physics states that always and everywhere particle and its anti-particle pairs spontaneously flash in and out of existence. So what it says that any empty space holds energy. And let's assume this blue colored square is an empty space 2D to make it more simpler. This has its own energy, and because it has energy, we understand that energy can be transformed into matter and matter into energy via Einstein's principle E is equal to mc square, which tells us what energy your matter is worth and what matter your energy is worth. Hence, with the same sentiment in mind, they say that there might be a scenario where particles which are transformed from energy, they can pop in and pop out of existence because of their antiparticle pair. But this popping in and out, this transaction of popping in and popping out is not even of 1 second. We are talking about microseconds, not even observable. So this is the closest that we can come to conclude what dark energy is made up of. And here to understand the next point, virtual particle says that any volume of space, even empty, contains energy. Even though virtual particles lead the briefest of lives that can be in the magnitudes of micro, every cubic foot of space will always contain several virtual particles. And the Kashmir effect is a non-cosmological phenomena that confirms this. The Kashmir effect is nothing but the proof of such hypothesis, but such hypothesis cannot be observed in real life since the duration is very small. You cannot put in a telescope in empty space and observe particles popping in and out. So it confirms this at a very mathematical model. Now we talk about how can we generate the mathematical terms for it. For any empty space, a certain volume has an energy, and let us call that energy E. Then it turns out it must have a pressure since it has energy. In fact, to ensure energy conservation, this is the energy conservation. Now, why is the negative sign here? Because we are talking about energy conservation. If something is converted into something, let's say kinetic energy is converted into potential energy, one increases and the other decreases. That is why the negative sign. Now, from the equations of general relativity, we can say that the substance with energy and pressure exerts a gravitational force that is proportional to E plus 3p. This can be derived from the Einstein's equation. Now, mind you, I am not talking about anti-gravity force. I am talking about gravitational force. Now, you yourself will conclude that yes, this gravitational force is acting in the opposite direction of our gravitational force. Let us equate this. Let's call this one equation 1 and equation 2. I'll place the value of E in equation 2. Sorry, the value of P, that is minus E here. And you have minus 2E, which is less than 0. So you have a negative energy, which if converted into pressure, it will be negative pressure. And this is a force. This is anti-gravity we are talking about, and this is the reason for expansion of our universe. Now, what about cosmological constant? Let us go some step back and understand that. All right. So after the announcement of Einstein that it was the greatest blunder of his life, 69 years later in 1998, Saul Perlmutter and his team studied and concluded something. They studied supernovas. This I explained you yesterday also. Let's say you are an observer here. You are again here. There is supernova means explosion of a star. This star explodes and this star explodes here. This is the distance d and this is the distance d dash. Let us assume that the observer is you and you are standing in a pitch black environment, pitch dark. You can't see anything, but you see two explosions. The stars are of similar sizes and the luminosities are similar. Can you say which one is farther and which one is nearer? Yes or no? Should I repeat? Let me simplify it for you. Let's say this is not a star. This is a 10-volt bulb. And this is also a 10-volt bulb. This is also a 10-volt bulb. Can you say which one is near to you and which one is far to you? Can you say or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yeah,
B1
Second one is the
How can you say?
the
What?
one which is brighter.
distance.
Exactly. So you are calculating the distance on the basis of brightness.
Light.
It's
Yeah.
luminosity.
Exactly. And why was that simple for you? Because both the bulbs were of 10 watts. Okay.
Yes.
So while talking about supernovas, within certain limits, Each of these stars explodes the same way, igniting the same amount of fuel, releasing the same amount of energy in the same amount of time. Now, this is something which is very coincidental in nature in outer space, thereby reaching the same peak, same luminosity. So whether the star is small or big, if they explode within certain limits, which they always do, there is similar amount of ignition of nuclear fuel, similar amount of energy produced, and similar amount of luminosity. Thus, they always serve as standard candles. Now, why are they called standard candles? Because at that time when this method was invented, we were not aware of how bulbs can be made and bulbs can be used. That is why the term candles came into picture, and they are called standard candles because they have the similar luminosity. And if you have similar luminosity of something, by looking at it in a pitch dark environment, you can say which one is far and which one is near to you. Now, since the supernovas all have the same wattage as of bulb, the dim ones are far away and the bright ones are close by, that you all mentioned right now. And after measuring their brightness, you can tell exactly how far they are from you and from one another also. That is an important feature here. But if their luminosities were all different, you could not use brightness to measure the distance. Let's say if this was a 10-watt bulb and this is a 20-watt bulb, then you would see, according to the brightness, both the bulbs to be at the same distance. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yes, sir.
But thankfully, that is not the case. All the supernovas explode at a peak luminosity that can be achieved by everyone. If that was not the case, a dim one could be a high watt bulb far away, or maybe a low watt bulb close by. That we cannot say. But that is not the case. Now, this is the first method to determine the distance between you and any supernova, or between you and, or between two supernovas. Now, there is a second way to measure the distance to galaxies. The second way is their speed of recession from the Milky Way. That is their speed of recession from us. How fast they move away from our Milky Way galaxy. That is the second method. So by measuring a galaxy's speed of recession, one can deduce a galaxy's distance. Now, if these two well-tested methods give different distances for the same object, what is the scenario here? Do you understand my question? If you observe a galaxy here and there is a supernova explosion which you can see, you are present here. This is the distance d. You are the observer. You also know its recession velocity. And you also know its luminosity. You use both of these methods to find out distance d. And you find two different answers. How is that possible? Is it possible or not, first of all?
If two galaxies are moving like with a constant rate, then it's, you can say, not possible.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your voice. Can you repeat?
If two of those galaxies are moving with the constant rate.
Two of the galaxies, I'm talking about only one. Are you talking about the observer also?
Okay. May I misunderstood? I thought you were talking about two different galaxies.
No. There is only one galaxy you are observing. The
Okay,
galaxy is obviously at a distance d. That is true in nature. There must be some distance between the observer and the galaxy. He wants to calculate the distance. We know two well-tested methods. And with the use of the both the methods, you should get the same result. Isn't that true?
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah. But that was not the case. Something was wrong at that time in 1998 when Saul Perlmutter and his team were measuring the distance from a galaxy. they found two different answers from two well-tested theories. Now, if you get two different answers, one of the theory is wrong, obviously. So either the supernovas were bad standard candles, or our model of the rate of cosmic expansion as measured by galaxy speed is wrong. And well, something was wrong, and it turned out that supernovas were splendid standard candles. So this method proved to be perfectly right. The problem was with recession velocity, the velocity at which, the rate at which the universe was expanding. More precisely, the galaxy was moving away from us. And so astrophysicists were left with a universe that had expanded faster than we thought, placing galaxies farther away than their recession speed, and there was no easy way to explain the extra expansion without invoking lambda. And that lambda was the cosmological constant given by Einstein, which he thought at that point of time was useless. And here was the first direct evidence that a repulsive force, an opposing gravitational force, is permeated the universe. Lambda suddenly acquired a physical reality that needed a name, and that we call today as dark energy. And the most accurate measurements to date reveal dark energy responsible for 68% of mass energy density. 68% of mass energy density in this universe. Dark matter comprises of 27% that I have told you, and regular matter a mere 5%. Also, one fascinating thing about the dark energy is the shape of our universe comes from the relationship between the amount of matter and energy that lives in the cosmos and the rate at which the cosmos is expanding. So whatever amount of matter energy we have, that we can efficiently call matter energy density, that parameter, and the rate of cosmic expansion, these two, when we have a relationship between these two parameters in a form of a mathematical equation, then that decides the shape of our universe, and that is called omega. So omega is its mathematical measure. So if you take the matter energy density of this universe and divide it by the matter energy density required to just barely halt the expansion, that is called the critical density, and that is the value of omega. And since both mass and energy cause space-time to wrap or curve, omega tells us the shape of our cosmos. And all the visible matter could account for no more than 5% of critical density. You imagine, critical density gives us the shape of our present-day universe. And all the visible matter could not account for more than 5% of critical density. You imagine what mass we experience, what mass we know, billions of galaxies, those mass we can observe and we can experience. That all mass accounted together is no more than 5%. So you imagine on what scale are we talking about when we talk about dark matter or dark energy. So they are abundant in form when we consider or when we compare it with our normal matter and density. And until the discovery of dark energy, that single component, when added to ordinary energy, ordinary matter and dark matter, raised the mass energy density of the universe to the critical level. So dark energy is the only parameter that rises the matter energy density to the critical level. All right, so let's now go to the cosmological constant again. Now we understood how cosmological constant took a physical reality in the recent years. But what happened after the equation given by Einstein that he had to call cosmological constant at that point of time the greatest mistake of his life? So what was something that was not, that people were not aware of at that point of time? So Einstein's new equations of gravity included this term, lambda that we call cosmological constant.
Recording in
Universe is
progress.
static. If the universe is static, can we exist today?
No,
Right.
the planets will collapse.
Exactly. There will be a center of gravity somewhere if there is a static universe, and on that center of gravity, everything will collapse because the gravitational force of such huge masses, if we talk about galaxy clusters and the local groups, then the gravitational force is such huge that if there is no opposing force, the force of gravity will call for all the member galaxies to collapse on the center of gravity. Now, if the universe was static, which was considered at that time in 1915, if this was static, then the universe was not supposed to be existing. That Einstein understood. So he thought, since we are existing and since everything is not collapsing on a single point, there must be some resisting force. There is something that is resisting this collapse, but not expanding. That was not thought by Einstein. So lambda had the job to oppose the gravity within Einstein's static model, keeping the universe in balance, resisting the natural tendency of gravity to pull the whole universe into one giant mass. So now you understand what cosmological constant is. He added a term cosmological constant which accounted for this resisting force. But the problem was he said that lambda should be equal to what gravitational force is required to collapse the whole universe. The inward force because of gravity is exactly equal to the outward force given by cosmological constant. What provided that outward force? No one knew. But there was a force that was known to them. Otherwise, the universe was not existing. Now, Einstein knew that lambda as a negative force of nature had no counterpart in the physical universe. How would you explain this resisting force? There is no such parameter that can give you a force opposing gravity. At that point of time, since dark energy was not discovered, he knew that there is no physical reality of cosmological constant. So this was when he announced his general theory of relativity. But 30 years later, in 1929, astrophysicist Edwin Hubble, on whom we have the Hubble Space Telescope in his honor, Edwin Hubble in 1929 discovered that universe is not static. It is not static at all. He had found and assembled convincing evidence that the more distant a galaxy, the faster the galaxy recedes. What do I mean when I say recede? That it moves away from the Milky Way galaxy. That the farther a galaxy, the faster it moves away from us. In other words, the universe is expanding. And when Einstein knew that universe was expanding, it was expanding at a rate, then this cosmological constant he thought was useless. And Einstein discarded lambda entirely, calling it is his life's greatest blunder. So that is how the whole cosmological constant story goes like. So there are two important differences between dark energy and the cosmological constant. I have explained you verbally, but let us deep dive more into the fact on what basis do we differentiate the dark energy and cosmological constant. Because now, since you understood that the universe is expanding, you must think that yes, cosmological constant is now can be called as dark energy, but there are still a very substantial amount of differences. The first key difference is the physical effect. Now, Einstein introduced his cosmological constant to counterbalance the gravitational attraction that was provided by matter, and that would provide static solution to his field equations. Now we know that the expansion is at an exponential rate. So dark energy is not giving you anti-gravitational force exactly of the amount of gravitational force. It is more than the gravitational force, and that is why it allows us to expand further. So dark energy provides neither balance nor a static solution. It provides a expanding solution. And the effect of dark energy, because we consider an expanding model, it is nothing like what Einstein sought to achieve. He wanted to achieve a static model. This is the first difference. Now, secondly, dark energy and cosmological constant differ in methodology and philosophy. Now, why is this so? When Einstein modified his field equations in 1917, he added the cosmological constant to the geometry side of his equations, making them, see, to just give you an example, if I have x plus y, sorry, let's just say x equal to y, then if I add plus 2 here, or if I add, removing this, minus 2 here, sorry, then it means the same thing. If I solve it using simple calculus, then it means same thing. But if you do the same with the Einstein's field equation, then it makes a real difference in the physical reality. And what is that? So this is the field equation given by Einstein. G plus lambda is equal to 8 pi t. Now that means because it was written G plus lambda, the lambda was added to the geometrical side of his equation, and it somehow due to the geometry of our universe. This means that lambda is invoked due to the geometry of our universe, and the rest of equation is 8 by t. This t is the energy, and this energy in all of its form is properly on the right hand side of this equation. You can see here, if lambda has to be added, then it has to be added here. That is the dark energy. Because lambda does not arise from geometry, it arises out of energy and pressure. That is why this was the second mistake by Einstein. Now, a remarkable feature of lambda and the accelerating universe is that the repulsive force arises from within the vacuum itself, not from any material. So as the vacuum grows, the density of matter and familiar energy within the universe dilutes or say diminishes. With greater repulsive pressure comes more vacuum, and with more vacuum comes greater repulsive pressure. So it is vice versa, forcing on endless and exponential acceleration of our cosmic expansion. So what I mean is, let me represent here. So if let's say on a two-dimensional or let me say a one-dimensional scale, this is the expansion of our universe and this is the boundary of it. So when the vacuum grows, let's say for 1 kilometer in the time of 1 second, when vacuum grows, along with the growth of this vacuum, the dark energy also grows. And this dark energy is responsible for the growth of next 1 kilometer of vacuum. This 1 kilometer of vacuum will again allow more dark energy to grow. The same will go on again and again, and this effect will be compounded over time. So it is, if this is 1 kilometer, this is 2, then next is 4, then next is 8, then is 16. This goes on, then is 32. So we are expanding at an exponential rate. The more vacuum grows, the more dark energy grows, and the more dark energy grows, the more vacuum grows. And to just give you a very weird fascination. In a trillion years or so, anyone alive in our own galaxy may know nothing of other galaxies. Our observable universe will merely be Milky Way, and beyond this starry night will lie an endless void of darkness. The expansion would be such that the Milky Way galaxy would not be able to afford to observe any other galaxy. The other galaxies and other clusters would be so far from each other, from us, even we would not be able to observe with any telescope, or we would not be able to go to those galaxy clusters after a trillion years from today. So that expansion will be exponential, and it will reach to a certain point when everything will be far enough to us to even observe it. So that will be a case at that point of time. Now to come back to the second point of the difference between Einstein's equation and dark energy, here I mentioned you that the terms on the right hand side of the equation represents normal matter, radiation, dark matter, and dark energy. That is the form of energy. And it ultimately makes, as I said, when I write x equal to y, and if I write plus 2 here, or if I remove this plus 2 and if I write minus 2 here, that makes no sense, right? Because if you compute it, that will give you the same answer. But when you put forward your physical interpretation of that equation, it makes a large difference. So inserting an unknown geometrical effect is very different philosophically from including the energy of virtual particles due to quantum nature. Now, what might dark energy be and how is it related? So as I told you, the closest we have come, anybody has come, is to presume dark energy is a quantum effect, where the vacuum of space, instead of being empty, actually seethes with particles and their antimatter counterparts. They pop in and out of existence in pairs and don't last long enough to be measured. And that is the deepest question confronting physicists today. But with whatever standard model of particle physics we have, along with quantum physics, we cannot define dark energy by any other possible way. That is not in right now in our hands. We are not mature enough technologically to understand the composition of it. Now, there is a Heisenberg's uncertainty principle that even in empty space, particles and the antiparticles pop in and out for short periods of time. And this is the virtual particle idea. All right.